Hey guys, and welcome back to Me No Wonders. So recently, I've been getting a lot of comments on the video I made last year about whether or not going to grad school for an MFA in creative writing is worth it. And since that's something that I feel like a lot of people are interested in, I thought that I would kind of turn this into a series where I talk about certain aspects of grad school that a lot of you guys might be interested in. And a lot of people have asked about things like, what's better, the MFA program or the MAL or Media and Literature Studies program? So I have a lot of friends who are in MAL, and I think I'll be asking them about that and making sort of more informative videos for you guys also. Some things that you guys are interested in that are more anecdotal or kind of experiential, then feel free to leave them in the description box below. For today, I'm going to be talking about 5 things that you should know before you make the move to enter grad school, and specifically I will be talking about the MFA program. I feel like there are some grad school programs that this might not apply to. Like for example, if you're applying for an MBA or if you are going to law school, I feel like the game is completely different. So this is just going to sort of apply to my own liberal arts ask. So the first thing is to kind of plan things out financially. I think that's sort of where I made a mistake, or I don't want to say made a mistake necessarily, but that's sort of where I had a really hard time. Okay, so initially I went to grad school kind of on a whim. My friend Austir, who I did a Let's Fight episode with, was the one who actually convinced me to go. Yeah, and we knew some people who were in grad school, and they told us that the tuition fee at De La Salle was 18,000. Now for me, I felt like that was very cheap because I went to De La Salle for my undergrad, so I kind of had a different figure in my head, although of course during undergrad it was like an average of like 18 to 21 units per term, so it was definitely like a different ball game. So with that in mind, like my mind frame was kind of like, okay, so I'll prepare for 18,000 and I'm gonna get a scholarship. I guess that's sort of special snowflake syndrome, where you feel like it's gonna be a yes. Like you can definitely like get whatever it is that you want to get. And I feel like that's very common, especially with people who apply to grad school, because usually people who do that are people who have a certain level of confidence in their skills. Now the thing that I didn't know is that actually the department doesn't give scholarships to people who are on their first term. So they sort of need to have some grades from you, which completely makes sense in hindsight. They need to have grades and output, because of course getting into grad school, the thing you submit is your transcript of records from your undergrad study. So it doesn't really make sense because, for example, my undergrad was in pre-med BS Psych, so yeah, so they couldn't base it on that, definitely. And I guess that's something that I really didn't take into account or consider. And there's some people who are lucky enough to be helped out by their parents, so if that's the case with you, then I would say give your parents a realistic figure. Wait for the quotation from the registrar's office, because it also changes per batch. So for example, the friend of ours who had a tuition fee of 18,000, he was ahead of us by around a year, I think. So in La Salle, that's 3 terms. Yeah, and by the time our term came around, the tuition fee was almost at 40,000. So it was around 32,700, something like that. And yeah, so that was a real shock for us, like when we got the EAF. And at first I thought that maybe it would just be like minus lab fees or something, because we don't really have lab in creative writing, but turns out it's like a standard charge for everyone who uses the Miguel building. So I guess it kind of makes sense in a strange way. I guess they sort of stagger their costs and just sort of lump it together in something labeled like a lab fee. But I just thought that that's something you guys might want to consider. So a lot of you might be asking like what my particular situation was. So for me, actually I didn't have anyone to help me out like with the tuition fee. because it's not that my mom isn't supportive. I guess it's just that she doesn't really see the value in having an MFA in creative writing, which is strange actually, because my mom my mom actually studied under Ofi de Malanta, who is like a pretty famous canonical writer in the Philippines. But I guess for her, she's always seen literature as something that isn't pragmatic, or something that you do for fun but you can't really make money off of. And she's not completely wrong, but I feel like things have sort of improved with the internet and with people getting recognized for their work relatively younger, or like earlier on in life. So anyway, long story short, I didn't have enough money for the tuition fee that first term, but I didn't want to defer because, like I said, I sort of did this on a whim. So I felt like if I stopped, then I would lose momentum. So something I did is I took out a loan from the SSS, or the Social Security Services. The SSS. Basically, if you guys are working, or if you have a regular job, every month the company deducts a certain amount of money and puts it into your SSS fund. So when you retire, that's also the fund that's going to be given to you. So I think that's like one of the benefits of regular employment. Also, the thing about the SSS is that after a certain number of contributions, so if I'm not mistaken, I think it's like 32 contributions. So you have to be employed for at least 32 months, in short. I'm really bad at math, but I think 32 months is probably like a couple of years. 3 years? Okay, whatever. It's more than 2 years for sure. So yeah, so what I did is that I took out a loan from the SSS, and I was lucky enough to have been working for around 4 years already at the time, 4 or 5 years. So yeah, so that was an option for me. Another option that you guys have is credit card. So I think a lot of people nowadays have credit cards. I feel like it's a lot easier to get a credit card now than it was when I was 21. So if there's an option for you to get a credit card, you can pay like using your credit card, and LaSalle accepts installment payments. So you can have your tuition billed to you into installments. The only thing, of course, is that it will be cut from your credit limit. So let's say your credit limit is at 50,000. You will not be able to spend that 30,000 already. The only thing that's different is that the due date when you have to pay that back to the bank changes. I feel like that's something that if I had thought about it a little bit more, I probably like would have had an easier time that first trimester. But that said, it really also drove me, I guess, to be very ambitious about the scholarship that I wanted to apply for. So since my second term in LaSalle, I'm pretty proud to say that I've been a 100% scholar, and that's something that I work really, really hard on, because of course the thing about an MFA in creative writing is it's not like statistics, or it's not something like BS psychology where they check your chemistry grade or something. A big part of it is really your professor seeing potential in you, and your professor seeing how hard you're trying and how reliable you are as a student. I feel like that's a really big thing. And I guess that's sort of a segue into my second point, which is expected to be hard work. I feel like a lot of people think that the MFA program, because it is creative writing, it's like all we do is like sit outside and write poems with flowers in our hair, but it's really a lot of rigorous, extensive work. So for example, especially if you happen to be going to LaSalle and you have a class under Dr. Baitan, his classes are very rigorous, and I kind of appreciate that. I actually prefer teachers that are kind of strict, because I feel like it takes a lot of the guesswork out of what you have to do. Anyway, so Dr. Baitan, his class, for example, like he required us to read like readings that were like this thick, and he gave them to us on the first day of class, and we would have to read like we would have to read probably like three to four papers or essays for class every week. And if you don't come to class prepared, you are going to feel really stupid. And also, it is very different from taking your bachelor's degree, where I think teachers sort of give you leeway to figure out what you want, or they sort of operate on this assumption that you're still figuring out what you want to do. In grad school, the assumption is that this is what you want to do and that you apply to this of your own volition. So I think that that's definitely something that a lot of people need to consider. Number 3, I think another thing to consider is time management. So most of the people I know who are in grad school are also working full-time, myself included. So of course there's some people who have the luxury of being full-time students, and I feel like that's the dream. And so for them, I feel like if you are somebody who has quit your job to take up an MFA, then I think maybe this won't really be an issue for you, although you might still find some of it important, I guess, in terms of managing your time. So I feel like a lot of people take for granted the fact that grad school requirements take up a lot of time, especially in the business, so to speak, of creative writing, where you need to gauge yourself emotionally to be able to produce work. And the thing is that you're constantly kind of shifting between a critical mindset and a creative mindset. So it takes you a lot of time to get in the groove of that creative mindset. Like, I can't crack out a poem just like that, right? Like, I would need to sit down and think about it. And the same thing goes for like whatever genre you're pursuing. For MFA, it isn't like you just choose one thing and then run with it. You will have to write in every genre. So you will have a techniques class and a workshop class for poetry, fiction, playwriting, and creative nonfiction. So you will have to work within those genres. And it is sort of very fast-paced, where you will be doing a workshop, like especially in the workshop class, you will be producing work every week. And there will be like a workshop or a critiquing session every week. A lot of people tend to use their old work or just submit work that they've already had sort of lying around. And I kind of understand that to a certain extent, especially if it's a piece that you are still grappling with, that you're still interested in. But also I wouldn't recommend doing that for the whole thing, like for all, like, well, one term is 3 months, so like for all of those 12 to 14-ish weeks, just because I think it's a waste. I think there is value in producing work that quickly, where you get to hone like how quickly you're able to calibrate yourself. I feel like a lot of people would argue, of course, that there is like this natural startup time, and I guess that is true. But I feel like there's also a skill element to it, where as you get older, you kind of learn to discipline yourself as well emotionally, and you also kind of are able to figure out what triggers put you in that mindset for writing creatively or for writing critically. So for example, for me, I guess I would have to be at my desk and I would have had to have some coffee. I like reading a little bit from some writers that I like before I get started, just to sort of remind myself what the end goal is. So there is stuff like that. Like, I think people need to figure that out. So for example, if you are plotting like the time to set aside to write your paper, your critical paper, I think that maybe setting aside just an hour isn't gonna work. Because first of all, after you've read everything, you also need to kind of highlight everything, annotate everything, and you have to get your notes from the book and put them down like in MLA format, and then you need to write like your actual synthesis of it. So I feel like maybe 4 to 6 hours staggered over the week would probably be the best. And if you're pulling an all-nighter, well, I guess that works too, as long as you know what you're getting yourself into. Okay, so number 4 is not to take anything personally. So I think this is a big thing, especially when it comes to critiquing work. A lot of the times in class you can tell who's had their work critiqued before and who hasn't. And just because I feel like by nature writers tend to be a little bit egotistical, myself included. I feel like because we are so entangled in our work and we're so attached to it, and usually it draws from our own experiences. When someone gives us feedback on our work, or when someone says like, I don't think this is working, or I think you can scrap this part, usually that's met with a lot of resistance. And in some cases, I think it's definitely fine to defend your work, or it's definitely fine to kind of speak up and to tell your instructors or to tell your peers where you were coming from with that, especially toward the end of the workshop where you are given space to sort of talk about that. But I think that there's a way to defend your work without necessarily being defensive either. And I think that that's sort of where the thin line is between accepting criticism for your work but still respecting the process that you came from and the thing that you want to achieve and your own aesthetic. And also, I guess, being the kind of person that believes that they know everything already. I feel like believing you know everything is probably the worst thing that you can do for yourself. I'm not sure if you guys have heard of Carol Dweck, but she's an American psychologist and she's used a lot in educational frameworks. She's my boss's favorite. I found out about her actually because my boss was talking to me about her and the kind of mindset that she believed we would be needing forever, basically. And that is the growth mindset, where you never think that, oh, like, I'm not good at this, so I'm not going to do it anymore, or like, oh, I'm not naturally geared toward writing something. And so because of that, like, if you think in that way, you're not really adapting a growth mindset, you're adapting a fixed mindset where this is what I do and this is all I'm gonna do. But if you adapt the growth mindset, it's like, okay, so maybe I'm not naturally geared toward, let's say, playwriting, which I'm not. But I'll kind of learn the ropes and I'll do my best to produce something that will give me a good grade, or that will sort of at least further my education in creative writing. And I think that that's definitely the kind of mindset you need to have. You also need to be very respectful of your peers. It's sort of a two-way thing. So on the one hand, you need to be willing to take criticism, but you also have to know how to give criticism, where, you know, it's not always about bashing or like making fun of things that don't work in the work, although I understand how that can be tempting. And I'm sure that, you know, if you go into grad school, you will find your friends with whom you can probably do that privately. But for the sake of class and professionalism and etiquette, like during the workshop, I think that's something that you really need to work on as well. And last but not the least, at number 5, I guess the thing that I think people should consider would be like their goals, like their career goals and what they really want to do with this degree, because it's not cheap and you are spending a lot of time sort of studying, creating these things, putting effort into papers. So it would really suck if after graduating you kind of figured out that, holy shit, this is not the track that I want. And I've sort of seen that happen to some people. Like, I know some people who've shifted out of the program, and that's perfectly fine, but it's like this rule in sales of win fast, lose fast. Yeah. So if you get into the program and you know immediately it's not for you, then, you know, it's fine to go. And if you are just applying and you haven't thought about your goals yet or what you want to do with this degree, I think it's a good time to start before you even spend that initial 30,000 or however much it's going to be when we return from the pandemic. For example, for myself, going into it, I kind of knew that I really want to pursue creative writing. My goals include publishing a book, becoming a fellow like to an international program, having my work published in journals and anthologies, that kind of thing. There are some people who join the MFA program with different goals. For example, they want to be promoted at work because they are teachers and they would need a master's degree to get promoted as per CHED or DepEd or whatever governing body there is. Now for that, there is actually another course which I mentioned earlier on in this video, which is MAL, or Media and Literature Studies. Now I think that there are a lot of people who are in MFA at first because they think that that's sort of the easier track to go to. Because in MAL, it is very rigorous scholarly work. Like, you will be plowing through papers and papers and papers and reading critiques. But the thing is that creative writing can be very, very difficult, and especially if you haven't sort of had the preparatory work, I guess, to prime yourself to be immersed and to sort of engage in craft in this very fast-paced but like fully immersed way. So I think that goals are very, very important, and you should sort of think about that first. And also, I feel like if you are going to be an educator, and like an educator more on the criticism side, I guess, I think that you do need that rigorous study. So I would say, like, don't shy away from MAL just because you think that it's going to be difficult, you know. Who knows? You might be very adept to that mode of learning. Like, you might find that once you're there, you actually really, really enjoy the program. Yeah. So I hope this video was helpful. If there are other things you'd like to know about grad school, please leave the questions in the description box below. So that's it for now. Thank you guys so much for watching. Don't forget to like this video if you liked it, and subscribe if you haven't already. Bye!